It's the Jim Fannin Show. We've come to take your mind.
Oh, am I still on? Shows with me tonight. We're gonna head fast and hard. I think we got about an hour. Welcome aboard. Buckle up. Okay, the producer usually is good enough to get the music down and get the Zoom window open. Okay. Andy Lee, I'm really glad to get to know you. I've been a short-time follower. By the way, you can't say you're canceled from Twitter if you're still on Twitter. You can't, like, quit leaning on that crutch already. Come on. Are you unmuted? You got to unmute for me. Sorry, I told you to mute, and then I forgot to give my guest the...
Well, I mean, you know, you have to be a short-time follower because I was genuinely canceled from Twitter, unfortunately. You know, I had a good base that I built over 2 years. Unfortunately, I was canceled during, I was covering the Freedom Convoy, and unfortunately I was suspended without reason. So, you know, so you have to be a short-time follower if you're following me now, because I just joined back up. So I definitely was canceled by Twitter. It's a bit of a mystery as to why they canceled me. Like I said, they never gave me any good reasons. So if you're listening to me tonight, probably you're all new listeners, and that's great. That's a very good thing. And I'm very, very grateful because Twitter's been actually very, very good to me since I've been back. You know, I've reported numerous accounts for various reasons. You know, I don't report... you know, I'm not like, you know, I'm always reporting accounts, but there have been some accounts that were, you know, genuinely concerning that I've reported, and Twitter has taken them down. So, and obviously knowing and looking at me saying, well, we suspended this woman before, right? So we're going to side with her this time. So it's a little bit of a mystery, Twitter, and how it operates. It's very, very interesting. I love how, you know, this acquisition of Twitter from Elon Musk is bringing all this out, and you know, maybe showing us as to how our social media platforms are actually run. You know, I look at bots and things like that. So I think that there's a lot of bot accounts, and you know, there's a lot of accounts that were created specifically, and this is really interesting. I've been working with some researchers as to how many accounts. We're going to do a study on this, actually. It's going to be really, really cool, I think, as to how many accounts were actually created during the protests in Ottawa, you know, from mid-January till about, you know, mid-April, and to see how many accounts were actually created and what these accounts said during this time period, when the protests were going on in Ottawa, and which side they were on, and try to find out where they actually originated from, and their networks. I think that's going to be a really, really cool study. So I'm really, really excited about it. So yeah, anyways, so this is me. Good to meet you, Jim. It's our first time. So, you know, I mean, let's just get into it. I don't know.
Yeah. So it's interesting where your passions lie. You kind of, you gravitate towards the issues that you're passionate about, obviously. And when you feel like you have to stand up and say something, then you only have so many avenues to do it. So you're on terrestrial radio, correct?
I'm just on Twitter, and then I do a show with Marc Patrone on Sauga 960 AM.
Okay, so you are
So
actually on a physical radio station in Canada.
yeah. So we've got a good, we've got a good probably million of people that we can reach. So it's not a bad stretch. We try to do a show at least once a week on different issues. It doesn't really matter what the issue is, just common political events of the day or whatever. Yeah, and so I run my Twitter platform. I've got my own show that I'm trying to get ramped up. And of course we've got a YouTube channel, but I don't promote this stuff. I do this all for free, right? This is kind of more of it's a hobby slash passion slash obsession for me.
Yeah, I know.
So
the same. Well, tell us a little bit about where you started. How did you get into it? Are are you a personality of circumstance, or have you been in broadcasting for a long time? I mean, I've had several reiterations of the Jim Fannin Show. I had a couple radio shows, got fired from the last one for making fun of a local festival. It was actually one of my best bits, my last bit on that station. And then similarly to you, I've had multiple accounts canceled. I had a pretty good Jim Fannin Show YouTube channel that I rode. It was a 10-year-old channel, and then I just decided I was going to blow it up, and I blew it up, and I blew it up to, 6,000 subs and 3 million views in a few months. And I was very strategic about it. And then I put COVID in one of my titles, and they disappeared the whole channel in the early days. I put a Don Cherry podcast up, and I put coronavirus. Actually, it wasn't COVID back then. I put coronavirus in the title, and they just disappeared the channel and my income. It was about $1,500 a month for those 3 months, or a couple months, anyways. Yeah, my first check was $1,600. I'm like, oh, geez, you can make money on YouTube, and then it was just gone. So I've gone through. So I'm more interested in how you got to where you are and what you've done to get here, because I don't know that much about you, and I'm thinking most of my viewers and listeners won't know either. So I'm glad to hear the Andy Lee story from the beginning. I mean the beginning. Who are you?
It's not that interesting a story. So my mother, one of my mothers died. I've got two mothers. I'm blessed that way. So one of my mothers died during lockdowns, and I got really, really angry. And so I was lonely. So I took to Twitter, and I started fighting back on Twitter and social media and researching the federal government. And my family, my ex-husband, my children are Chinese. So I got really, really interested in sort of foreign influence in our government, corporate influence in our government. And so I sort of really focused on that. And I ended up being really, really good at it. And so Stephen Harper's former House leader, Jay Hill, took notice of me. He just said, I think that you have a real talent for politics. I had never done this before, anything like this before. So I was, I didn't know anything about politics, geopolitics, anything, any of this stuff. I didn't know anything about it. But he just said, you have a real affinity for it. Will you run for the federal election? So I ran for the federal election. It was a great experience. It really, really opened my eyes as to how politics are run in this country. I had a great team behind me. It was really, really amazing to see people who are really, really passionate about politics, not for any reason that is anything other than altruistic, right? Like it was really, really cool to, after examining how our politicians operate in our country, to see that people would rally behind, somebody who just genuinely wanted to do better, right? No ulterior motives or anything like that. So I was like, wow, they're still really good in our country. It was fascinating for me. And so then I briefly talked to Tamara Litch before the convoy. I was very, very concerned as to how these people were being portrayed in our media, and the verbiage being used. They were being painted as villains before they had even done anything, simply for protesting against our government. And I have a real issue with that. I think that that's an enshrouded right that all Canadians should feel that they are entitled to, and that they should be able to practice that. So I said that I would follow the convoy to Ottawa. So I followed them to Ottawa. I subsequently got deplatformed. Jordan Peterson had a huge fit when I was deplatformed. I also got debanked. My bank accounts were frozen as well while I was in Ottawa, unfortunately. But that's okay. I didn't let it get me down. I, regrouped, started over, and, started the Real Andy Lee show and said, you know what? So, I mean, this is, like I said, you don't have to be a career politician to do stuff like this, or a career media personality. And this is never what I intended to do. Like, I never thought I would be here talking with you, talking with Marc Patrone, talking with politicians, getting really good interviews, getting really good scoops, things like that. I never thought that I would do it. So anybody can do it if you have enough passion to do it, right? It's just, it's sort of like you have to just feel it and you have to go for it, right? And if I can do it, anybody can do it. There's nothing special about me whatsoever, right? I was just a single Canadian mom who was sick of lockdowns, right? And wanted to do something different. And I was like, can I make a difference in my country? And I like to think that, maybe I didn't make the biggest difference, but maybe I made some difference, and that's worth something, right? I feel like Canadians got really apathetic in our political system, in our rights and freedoms and things like that. We live in a very comfortable realm where, not much goes on in Canada. We're just sort of lounging in our own little realm here. Nothing really exciting goes on. And then all of a sudden we were put into like the center of scrutiny of the entire world for what we did, right? We rose up and protested against our government in an unprecedented way that was wild, that all of the world took note of, in protest of vaccine mandates, travel mandates, mandated mandatory boosters, right? Things like this. So, I mean, it was just sort of like this very, mostly, peaceful, quiet population all of a sudden rose up against all odds and stood up against their governments over lockdowns. It was very, very unexpected. And, so I felt like and I don't have to, here's the important thing about reporting. You don't have to agree with everything that people say to understand that they have a right to speak their minds. You don't have to agree with them. So even though I didn't agree with everything that the protesters did, I still had a deep respect that they had a right to speak their minds and to be heard, as long as their protest was legal and peaceful, which it was ruled to be by Superior Court, right? So it was like, I didn't need to, people like, you're getting on board with this. I'm like, no, I'm not even an anti-vaxxer. I'm vaccinated, right? Like, I had no personal vested interest in any of these movements, right? But it just, I realized that, our media bias has become so extreme in our country that, the right side really needs more defenders. And I don't even really like doing this because I'd like to be reporting more moderately. That's my personal feeling. I'd like to report on not just being a right-wing reporter. I'd like to also, report on things. There are issues in the left side as well, right? So I don't just want to be like stuck in one side of that political spectrum. I don't really like that. I wish I could branch out more, but it just, right now I'm boxed in because I feel like our left-wing media bias is so extreme that I have to stand up for one side and help defend them. So anyways, that's like a little nutshell of how I came to be here. Like I said, it was nothing glamorous. It was not intended. I fell into it. I think a lot of people have fallen into it. That's the really cool thing about social media nowadays is, before, before we were able to network in these manners, you couldn't really be heard on platforms. We only had one news source or a couple of news sources. Whereas now, if you can use social media, you can go anywhere for your news sources, right? You're not boxed in. You can go to, you can go to Jim, you can go to me, you can go to other people, right? It doesn't matter where you go to. But I think the important thing is that, and this is what I have a big problem with our government with, is trying to rein this in, because we know that they don't like these alternative news sources. They're talking about, being able to sort of regulate what YouTube, things like that, put out there. This is what I don't like it, is that I feel like it's really important to our democracy that we've been given choice. I think that that's essential, is that we've been given choices. And that's super, super, super important. We're not boxed into listening to what's on our 6 o'clock news.
Mm-hmm. Well, I hear you when you say, the bias of the media. It never used to be that way. Like when we were younger, we grew up around the television, and CBC and CNN weren't like that. Now it's actually embarrassing for me to watch. I don't find myself there very often. I get attracted to like Fox News because they actually still have fun on their shows and they're entertaining. I mean, Gavin McInnes. Oh shit, we got to hit that topic. Tucker Carlson, as far as a broadcaster goes, is flawless. He mispronounced a word the other day, and I'm like, write it down. The guy made a mistake. I think, is the show live? I mean, either way, it's live to tape. They don't do any post-production on that show, I don't think. But, and they have fun, and I feel like I'm getting both sides of it. You just give me the news and let me decide. Like, don't, but I do appreciate the fun, and, it's been a long journey for me being a lefty for so long, but the left wasn't crazy when I was with the left. They weren't talking about 100 different genders and boys can become girls. Like, we're in some scary stuff. And so I'd like to ask you, what you find the root cause is. I guess anyone with children, I don't have them, would say, I do it for the kids. I do it for the kids. It's exactly like when I had Shandor over, he was the guy that scraped up the stickers at Shoppers Drug Mart as a parody on Defiance almost, you know what I mean? It was a really deep joke, and he got arrested, whatever, he made a scene, filmed it. And then they arrested him for, we all got charged with breaking the lockdown, going to a protest and marching through the streets, one of the biggest celebrations of freedoms. I don't think St. Catharines, my little hometown of 140,000 people, actually had 2,000 or 3,000 people take to the streets, and the cops were cool. They shut down the streets, and they knew where we were going. I didn't march, but I took the mic. I was the lead MC, and I didn't talk very long, not even 2 minutes, and yeah, I had a charge for April 10th and April 17th, and April 10th and 17th, yeah, and they took Shandor to jail. Anyways, I don't know where I'm going with this now, or I was talking about Shandor. Anyways, with the media coverage, I'm wandering all over the place here. It just seems so biased now, and it didn't ever used to be that way, and it's hard to look at these accounts. And, through this whole pandemic, that's where we're going to, the underlying commitment. Oh, yeah, I know. Shandor brought his kid. I met his kid at the driveway after we did the interview, and he was 1. And he said, Jimmy, after this mask mandate's done, my kid will be, I think maybe he was 8 months old. I don't know. My kid will be like a year old, and he will not have seen a stranger's face in public. And that, for me, was it. That it was game on at that point. And I've always been political. I've always kind of had a show and been controversial enough. I love mocking and calling names and all the things that, I know I shouldn't do. It's funny. I'm fucking hilarious. There's no two ways about it. So shut up. If you don't like it, then whatever. But yeah, when he told me that, and then, we're not gonna see for decades the effect on our children. About the lockdowns, about the masking, about the loss of the school years. And that wasn't COVID that did that. That was not coronavirus that ruined our children. Because if we did nothing, we couldn't have changed the numbers at all. Like, I'm convinced everything we did, and I said it from the beginning, nothing of what you're doing is going to contain this. You cannot, this is why we went to all this work and shut down economies and mandated vaccines and masks. The masking of the children is absolutely bar none my biggest issue with it all, because I think it's most detrimental. And we have decades to see the results of that mask experiment, if you know what I mean. So yeah, I wonder what your underlying commitment is. Was there a point in time when you snapped, or was like something happened? I know I mentioned saw some of your writing. You're speaking about, you know, losing your mom over the pandemic and how that went down. Like, you know, what's your underlying commitment, and what kind of turned the switch for you to go, oh, it's all wrong?
Yeah, I mean, losing my mom was part of it. So I lost her really early on in the pandemic. That was in April 2020. That was when lockdowns had just started. We were told not to travel. You know, she unfortunately died, and I wasn't able to visit her. Yeah, so that was part of it. That got me on Twitter, it got me on social media, it got me reporting, it got me investigating, it got me networking. And actually, probably one of my, you know, my huge red pill moments was when I started looking at, um, you know, China. I started looking at, you know, the things that the WHO had put out. They were contradicted by China's own health authorities. So I was very, very concerned. And then, of course, you know, we had our own health authorities. We had Patty Hadju, we had Teresa Tam parroting this. Like, I found one tweet that went back, you know, and it was the WHO, and there was like, there's no clear evidence of human to human transmission. But that very same day, the Wuhan public health authorities had put out that there was evidence of human to human transmission. And of course, this was during when, you know, the point when Justin Trudeau was campaigning for a UN security council seat, right? He was like, I mean, when all this went down, he was campaigning for a UN security seat.
Right, which he lost.
So I was sort of like, are you just ignoring all of this, you know, this overwhelming information, you know, and sort of playing the game because, you know, you don't want to upset anybody who could, you know, potentially, you know, vote against you for your UN Security Council seat. So that was sort of my red pill moment. And then, yeah, I met up with some other people. Michael Sanger, fantastic author, attorney, suing Twitter right now. He was banned as well, wrote a great book. I think that my red pill moment was really though when I think it came independently, and it was after I was vaccinated, but I still wasn't allowed freedom of movement. And other places were still locked down. I was like, okay, so we're all vaccinated, but we're also locked down. You know, I can remember going to my kids' school for events, and I was double vaccinated. I would still have to mask. I would still have to show my QR code to get into the school.
Wow.
This is an elementary school. So I would have to show my QR code, even though I'm double vaccinated. I would have to mask. And then the kids would all still be masked and 6 feet apart, sitting in hula hoops. And I was like,
this is gross, man.
Hold on here. You said that this is my ticket to freedom, right? So like, when does normal start?
Wow.
Right? If normal doesn't start now, then when's it starting? And do you guys have any intention of starting normal?
Shapiro said the same thing. I took 2 shots. It's over. It's done. I'm free to go now. You can't do anything. I played your game. Well, I guess we're still recording. Do I have sound? Is my shit back up? Okay. Power outage. You're not hearing this. The Zoom meeting has ended. I think everything got ended. And I'm still recording. The Andy Lee Show was my guest. Till we unceremoniously was relieved of our duties. So this will be one for the archives. I'm going to try and get the show up, actually. I haven't been doing shows much lately. My last show was with Shandor and Pat Dixon and Josh Baker, the best damn roofer, and anyways, I'm watching my computer reboot here. Or no, my computer's not rebooting, but the rest of the system is rebooting. Yeah, it's the last time I did a show. And we're back again. Okay, so every time the power goes out, it flashes everything. And then the generator kicks in, and then when the generator kicks off, it does the same thing. So, this is fun. We might have to see if we can get her back. Yeah, we're 26 minutes in, so I was supposed to have her for an hour. So it might be all right after this. Having a butt. All right. So sorry about that. I'm a little sidetracked now because I'm not usually prepared for my power to go out. All right, well, welcome to the Jim Fannin Show. This is how we do it. Connected. All right, just communicating with the Andy Lee Show. Try and get her back in. I hate that, Daddy. So yeah, I haven't done a show in a while. I'll get this up on the podcast since we haven't had a show up in a while. Get this one up soon. It's rendering. Maybe I'm gonna have to reboot. Let's see here. Unable to connect. No. All right. Am I back in here, or am I gonna have to reboot? Join. Oh.
Recording in progress.
Sorry about that. How much fun is this? All right, so I think we should be good to go. I'm getting a red light on the bandwidth. Let's see, what am I going to do here? Let's reboot OBS. Oh, it's still recording. Maybe that's it. There she is. Nice. Maybe I shouldn't. No, let's just go back here. Oh, you're back with me already? Good.
Hey, yeah, no, I don't know what happened there. I just saw that I was the host and I was like, I'm gonna leave.
Yeah.
I don't know what happened. I just like dropped out. It was like, you are the host of this meeting. I was like, no, I'm not the host of this meeting. I'm out of here.
I am in Sauga, Dominican Republic, and you can't call it hydro. The power, the electricity is not reliable. So when it cuts, the generator kicks in, and then it kicks back out again. So it's flashed twice in the last couple minutes. We could be okay. We're not broadcasting.
It could be worse. We could be in California, right? I mean,
yeah.
Let's face it.
Let me see. I'm getting a red light on my OBS here. Oh, because it's streaming. So we'll stop the stream. Unless it restarted the stream, maybe. Start stream.
We did.
I'm just going to restart the stream and see. I've got a red light on my bandwidth, though, so I'm wondering why that is. I continued recording. Oh, it's going yellow, and now it's green. So we might be okay. That's a short commercial break. I haven't done a show in a while, so thank you for the opportunity, because I am so resigned and cynical through this whole thing. I left Canada, never thought I would leave my own country. I stood for candidacy 10 times. I ran for leadership of the Green Party in 2006 with Elizabeth May and David Chernyshenko. Man, how they've changed. And I've changed too, you know. I've been red-pilled. I thought Trump was hilarious, you know. And it's cost me everything, really, in my big mouth. And like I said, I'm not above mocking and calling names and that kind of stuff. So, and I, I've never said sorry. I'm not, it's just, I'm pissed off. But when I heard that they were going to stop the unvaccinated from leaving the country, I'm like, I can't be here. I don't want to be stuck anywhere. I want to believe I live in one of the freest countries on the planet. And I had 21 days and I booked it. I booked it on the 1st of October, and by the 22nd I flew out a week before the mandate came in, and it's going to be a year soon. And like the thoughts of me flying back to Toronto, I have nightmares about
too,
that.
Right? Marc did it too. It's all right.
So I appreciate the opportunity because I've gotten to the point where I'm blackpilled, where it's hopeless, and every time social media is a sickness for me. I look at it and it makes me angry, and it makes me rage, and it makes me say mean things, and I don't need that kind of stuff. And when I'm busy selling real estate down here, I'm not on social media. It's when I'm bored or I'm hardly ever bored these days, so I haven't been on it a lot. But I appreciate the opportunity. I'm having Shandor on tomorrow. He's the guy that scraped up the stickers in Chopper's Drug Mart and then went to jail for speaking on a megaphone. And
it's that's why I'm sort of struggling, because I'm trying to figure out what sort of like I said, because I never intended to do this. So I'm trying to figure out what kind of an ecosystem I'm creating. And I'm really, really looking hard at that. And, I'm looking at if I'm creating a positive ecosystem or a negative ecosystem. And some of the things I've done are definitely, no doubt, negative. But I've realized too that I can use now my influence to influence people positively, to exercise their rights in productive ways, right? Like I was talking about Elliot McDavid. So the way he yelled at Christian Freeland, was that illegal? No, he called her bad names, right? It was ugly. I didn't like watching it, but I was like, hold on here. That was a huge missed opportunity, because if Elliot McDavid had had a little bit of coaching, he could have asked her some really good questions, and she probably would have just slammed the door in his face and made herself look like the monster that she is, right? So we have to be able to use these opportunities to our best advantage and not to our detriment, right? Like I'm like, there's a way that you can put your message forward. I'm not going to be the free speech police. If you want to go out, swear at politicians, harass them, you know what, have at her, right?
Yeah, if it's
legal, is that the most productive way to get your message across? No, it's not. There's much more productive ways to get your message across. The way to get your message across is to make them look bad, not you. Well, right? So that's what I've really focused on, is how to get your politicians to make themselves look bad and not you look bad.
And that's the thing. Every time we look at them, they're so cringe, and everything they do is corrupt, and everything they do is broken. They could, as my father would say, they fuck up a one-car funeral. Like it's not, they do it to themselves. So it's hardly surprising that a guy like that is that pissed off and that filled with rage to come off like that. And I agree completely with you. The discourse, we could use to lower the temperature a little bit, but we wouldn't be in this position if you weren't seizing Canadians' bank accounts and locking them down and ruining their lives and telling us it's for the greater good and a new normal's around the corner and selling hope. And my heart breaks mostly for the kids, but also for the 80% of the people that just do what they're told. I can't believe we live in a society where the masses can be duped so easily. Like from the beginning, the masks don't do anything. As far as I'm concerned, this is a contact sport. You touch a surface that somebody else touches and then do what you're doing right now. You touch your eye, you're infected. I don't believe that, I always grew up with the knowledge, it could be fake news, I don't know, but my belief was always you could be in an elevator with someone with a contagious cold, coughing and spitting and sneezing and whatever. As long as they don't sneeze in your face, you getting what they've got just from being in that enclosed space is, as long as you don't touch them or something they touched, you're not going to get it. So I don't know about this airborne virus and you just breathe the air and now you're sick. I don't never. Anyways, I was, really stunned by how many people just bought in, and it broke my heart. I thought we had a bigger, we were more informed, we had more independent thinking, we could make up our minds. And no, most of the people just in my hometown, when we did the mask thing, we put it on it was mandatory indoors where you couldn't social distance. And the next day, everyone had them on the street in their cars. Like, they went way overboard with it. I'm like, first of all, why would you think putting a cloth diaper on your face is good for you? Second of all, why can't you stand up and just say no, enough? And now we know the mask didn't work. Social distancing didn't work. Wash your hands. So anyways, I'm blathering. It's not about me, but I sense.
No,
I
understand what you're saying. So this is something interesting about me, is that I grew up in the Greater Toronto area. I went to McMaster University. I lectured there. And I actually worked at Credit Valley as well. And I worked at Credit Valley during the SARS outbreak in 2003. So I was one of the first people who was exposed to a SARS patient in the GTA, and I had to quarantine. I had to choose which hospital I would go to. And of course, SARS was a different animal. It had a mortality rate for young people, that was approaching 11-12%. So it was a really, really terrifying respiratory disease, but not nearly as virulent. But I mean, if anybody ever said, here, you know what, put on a cloth mask and go deal with this SARS patient, I would have been like, yeah, no. I'm going to take my fit tested, N95, whatever that might be. I mean, when you work with actual, super virulent contagious diseases that are really detrimental in hospitals, you go through these fit testings once a year. So you go through various N95 masks. They'll fit test you to make sure that you've got an excellent seal and things like that to prevent transmission when you're working with people with things like active TB, right? Things like that. So, I mean, I actually went through this with SARS in 2003. And so I was kind of laughing when our health officials were like, yeah, you can just wear whatever mask you want in 2020, but wear it or else you'll get a ticket. And I'm kind of like, well, okay. I mean, I would never, if this was like a deadly disease, I would never be like, okay, I'm just going to slap a cloth mask on my face that I bought at Shoppers Drug Mart
I'm sure
and pretend that this is protecting me.
Right.
And you're going to ticket me if I'm not wearing this and pretend like this is reducing transmission. These are not the standard procedures that are followed in hospitals at all. Or, airborne, virulence, respiratory diseases. These are not the standards. Right. But yet all of a sudden they were sort of, enshrined into pandemic law for some reason. And I'm like, I mean, sure. Do they help a little bit? Is it a layer? Yeah, sure. Maybe it's a layer of protection. But I mean, let's face it, a layer of protection against what? Most of our population was vaccinated. And the bulk of our population was never really at huge risk at all. That's what the data says.
And we didn't intentionally protect the ones that we knew right off the bat. We knew right off the bat the average age was 80 for deaths.
I mean, we trapped them. We trapped them into long-term care homes. We said that basically you have to stay in your care homes. You can't get out. You can't go outside. You can't leave. You have to stay in your rooms. And so what we actually did is and there was a great study did. I wish I had it on hand. There was actually a great study done really early on in the pandemic, and it showed that lockdowns were the most effective when they were extremely brief and harsh. So we're talking about under 2 weeks and then done. And they actually showed that, people who were locked into long-term care facilities and things like that may have had an increased risk of transmission because they weren't allowed to escape from that environment, right? We locked our seniors into homes where people weren't allowed into, right? There was poor staffing. We laid off a whole bunch of staff. Long-term care staff wouldn't go to work. My mom worked in long-term care. She did great in her long-term care home. They never got any sort of an outbreak or anything, but that was really, really rare in the GTA. That wasn't the norm. The norm was that there was outbreaks, and these outbreaks ripped through these long-term care facilities because they lacked proper protective equipment. There was no hand sanitizer or things like that at the beginning. I mean, my mom, I can remember my mom texting me and she was like, can you find me a homemade recipe for hand sanitizer? And she's working in a long-term care home in the GTA, right? And I'm like, okay, here's a recipe if you can find these ingredients, right? Here you go. So I mean, this is what they were dealing with early on in the pandemic. But I mean, it was bonkers because we were sending out PPE all over the planet, like this was never going to hit us. Meanwhile, most of that PPE came back in the form of gifts from foreign countries, right? Especially China. Like we sent out how many tons? I think it was 16 tons of PPE to China in the beginning of the pandemic. Then Huawei turned around and they were like, well, we're going to return the favor. We're going to give you all that PPE back. And I was like, of course, Huawei is going to give us all this PPE back that China desperately needs. I mean, you would think that if China really needed PPE, they would be getting it from an internal source like Huawei. And Huawei wouldn't be giving it away to a country that's maybe thinking about banning their 5G technology. Like, let's get real here, people. What's going on here? I mean, if you guys needed it, you would have kept it. You wouldn't have sent it to Canada as we're trying to make a ruling as to whether Huawei should be included in our 5G network. Right? I mean, like, let's open our eyes here. And so, yeah, there's so many of these moments where you're just like, something has gone wrong here, but they won't give it up. You know, they won't relinquish this. They won't walk it back because nobody likes to be wrong. I mean, I don't like to be wrong either, but let's face it, though, a lot of things went wrong here, right? There was not the proper scrutiny. There was a lot of foreign influence. There was a lot of misinformation. There was a lot of fear mongering, right? And there was a lot of power grabs that happened that, people don't want to relinquish. And so those are all important things that we have to acknowledge. And I agree with you that we're going to be unpacking this for decades, if not the next century, honestly. I mean, this was an unprecedented thing. And yeah, I mean, the kids for sure. I mean, we've seen kids. That was one of my first concerns is, we have a low risk age group who has been, who is not able to receive their education. And so my daughter was 1.5 when the pandemic hit. So she went basically a full 2 years, never talking to anybody aside from her immediate family. And these are the most important years for language, right? From the time you're like 1 till 3, this is when you gain language skills. So she basically learned to talk only within the members of her own house. This was hugely concerning to me. And whenever she went out of the house, she had to wear a mask, right? So she had no way of learning unverbal communications, right? And things like that. Like, and there's so many things when it comes to talking to people. Even right now, I'm looking at your face. There's nuance, right? My words don't matter anywhere as much as my nuance matters and things like that, right? How you present yourself. So those things are all so important, and our kids missed out on that, and they're going to be nailed big time. And I think the huge tragedy of this is that what we're going to see probably in the future is that kids are going to have an even harder time relating to each other and other people in the real world. And probably they're going to have an easier time relating to online life, which is already dangerous before this. Social media, kids took to social media en masse during the pandemic. It was how they communicated. It was already a little bit of a slippery slope, a little bit of a dangerous place for them to go. Unbridled access to YouTube, TikTok, all these platforms that are not really well policed. And so these are what kids use during the pandemic. And so I think that what we're going to see is that we're going to see, because the kids were not taught proper in-person verbal and nonverbal communication, I think that we're going to see them increasingly turning to online communication because that's what they were conditioned to use. It's a pretty sad story.
You said something that just kind of resonated with me. I'm willing to concede the point. Social media is dangerous because I'm normally the guy, I'm like, dangerous, whatever, what words aren't violence, blah, blah, blah. So maybe not in that sense, although it could be used for that. I don't think it is much. I'm not a believer in, you know, we hold women down and we're racist. I don't buy into that whole, yeah, you have isolated incidents, but people get mocked and yelled at because they're shitty people. Like, we don't, you know, there are, like, we're so tolerant now, you know, and, you know, but dangerous from this the mental health standpoint, if you put it in that context, then I think it is very dangerous for all of us that are out here engaged in this. And it's affecting us one way or another, not in a very good way. I'm not, you know, like the kids that are growing up with parents that limit their screen times or don't let them go online, I think are going to be way better off for it. You know, like I feel polluted by social media. It's an addiction for me. It's like a drug. I feel like, you know, I need it for marketing and promotion and all that kind of stuff. But no, I go out there and it's almost like, I mean, I remember having Primo on or somebody there, you know, a year ago. And I'm like, you know, am I one of those guys that wakes up in the morning and then goes to Twitter to find out what to be raged about? Like, have I fallen into that? That's my dopamine. That's my drug. I just go find people to get pissed off at because that's all that's on Twitter. It doesn't make you feel good, you know, but, or you get an echo chamber and everyone agrees with you. So yeah, when you said dangerous, I'm like, yeah, dangerous. Yeah. Dangerous.
It is dangerous. It is dangerous. And like I said, I've fallen into that trap myself, right? Where I'm just like going out there and I'm like, I can score a lot of points if I say this, but I'm trying to rein that in and be like, wait a minute, is this sort of the best use of my time? You know, how is this going to make this other person feel? You know, there's a lot of bot accounts out there and things like that, but there's also a lot of real people behind these accounts that put a lot of work into them. So, you know, is this my job is to go out there and go to war with the other side of social media every day? Is that productive? No, it's much more productive for me to be researching, finding documents, finding contracts, you know, finding stories, things like that, putting it out there, trying to be not biased. Although obviously I have an issue with the government, the current government, not necessarily liberals in general. People are like, you know, you hate liberals. I'm like, I actually don't hate liberals.
I've been hating whoever's in power for a long
previous
time.
Liberals. I love some previous NDPers and even some Greens, right? And I certainly love the Reform Party. So I'm like, it's really not. I just have a huge issue with the way that this particular liberal government has conducted themselves. I think that they've conducted themselves in a way that is extremely unbecoming. So that's not what, but I'm like, you know, would it be better served, you know, should I get into these, you know, these mass wars, you know, with these big accounts and try to, you know, bring them down? No, that's actually not the best use of my time. The best use of my time is just to research, throw up documents, be like, this is what's happened. This is what I found. You know, take that at how you will, right?
Yeah, you mentioned Preston, or I'll mention Preston Manning. Wow, I heard him on with Jordan Peterson, and wow, and I'm going to fanboy a little bit here. Jordan Peterson, I mean, I've got a degree in Jordan Peterson. I took his course. You know, I've watched all of his content from the early days because I'm fascinated by psychological lectures. I'm like, what's not to be fascinated about the human mind, the human condition, you know, the way we work. And yeah, I was obsessed with it, you know, because it was all I was learning. I was taking university lectures. And when he dissected Genesis, and I think he did Exodus as well. Wow. So, yeah, when you mentioned that he freaked out, what, you got some pub from JBP? I've missed that completely, or I wasn't familiar.
No,
I wasn't
he had
connected.
a right proper meltdown when I was deplatformed. He really went to town for me, bless his heart. You know, and I was, you know, yeah. So there was some articles written, yeah. So he was like, you know, Twitter censor me too, I dare you.
Oh, that okay, yeah. So I do remember it. Refresh me on what time it was. What did we haven't told the story of that, how that went down, have we? Yeah, refresh my
how
memory.
I got deplatformed.
Yeah,
well,
what he was
maybe
tweeting.
that'll be for next time.
Okay.
I probably have to go, but we can bring up some tweets and stuff if you like. Okay. Yep. But anyways, yeah, no, he really did go to town for me. Very cool. Yeah, he sort of picked me up when I was covering the convoy. You know, I never really expected to be picked up by somebody like that. I'm gonna say that I don't agree with all of his stuff. but I do really appreciate what he brings to the table thought wise. And I
He's
think
a
that's
deep
really, really
thinker.
important
Mm-hmm.
to note is that, you know what? You don't have to agree with
No.
everybody to appreciate what they bring to your table.
Mm-hmm.
You're never going to grow if you don't get out of your echo chamber and think about things, right? That's so important. And that's something that I'm learning too, right? Is that listen to people who don't agree with me, try to see their point of view, right? Try to understand why they're coming from, why they think, you know, the way that they're thinking. Try to make them understand why you're thinking the way that you're thinking, right? And that is psychology, like in and of itself, right? Is deconstructing the mind and how we work. And so all of our minds are very, very different. But I think that, you know, if we look harder, we can put aside partisanship and find more commonality than we think.
Amen.
And so that's what I'm really, really interested in doing right now is trying to, you know, not contribute to an unhealthy environment, not contribute to an unhealthy online environment, an unhealthy social media environment, things that could be harmful. I'm much more interested in you know, if I can forge, you know, friendships, bridges, alliances with people who are different than me, and try to, you know, have a reasonable discourse and show that, yeah, this is possible, right? We don't have to be divisive. We don't have to act the way that we're acting. You know, we can be better than our politicians. We can rise above all this, right? And we can have really good conversations that are really, really interesting to people that do not necessarily have to revolve around us tearing each other apart.
Amen. I'm
right?
just going out with your tweet that you sent me over earlier about Blackstone.
Oh man, you do not want to get into that now. That's an hour long in and of itself.
Yeah.
I can tell you, if you want to have me back, I'll tell you a fantastic story about that tweet.
Right.
It was before my old account was censored. I had a huge thread on that. It had 1.2 million views.
Nice. I love it when it goes viral. Good
So,
for
and
you, man.
Translated into multiple different languages.
Awesome.
So it was a massive thread. So if you want to go into that, we should probably do it another day.
Perfect. I appreciate your time. Thanks for doing it. And it was nice to get to
Yeah.
know you, and glad to put a face to the
Get
Twitter
to know you
account. Yeah.
too. Thanks
Appreciate
for
it.
having me on.
Okay.
And anytime. It was, yeah, I mean, this is what we're doing, right? We're networking. Like I said, this is a fantastic, fascinating time in our lives when we can, you know, we're not dependent on, you know, the normal channels for news and information, things like that, right? You can go to alternative sources. You can get alternative media sources. You don't have to agree with them, but search them out, right? Go outside your box.
Amen.
You might be surprised by what you find sometimes if you go outside your box.
I agree with you. Well, as tradition, I'll tell you, I love you because I love everyone I talk to, and
I love you too.
Try to practice it with the people I don't talk to. It's hard to get liberals to come on and talk to me, and you know, I end up talking to people I agree with a lot. So I do appreciate the personal depth that you went into, and I look forward to you to hitting our fast-moving show on something that you're breaking soon. So it's great that you're at the front edge of. Yeah, it's great. It's kind of, I'm putting, you know, trying it on a little bit. You know, how cool is it that people come to you with information? You know what I mean? Like I'm out of the game. I'm in Dominican Republic. I'm selling real estate. I'm not doing. I had a buddy say, Jimmy, why aren't you broadcasting the trucks? I go, because I don't care. And he goes, but the clicks. And I go, yeah, and I don't care about that. I'm trying to get my life together down here and build it. Like I left everything in Canada, right? And then when Maxine Bernier and Randy Hilliard did the press conference, I've been so starved for good, solid leadership on the microphone. And they answered all the media's questions perfectly with science. I'm like, this is my Canadian. I put the flag back in my Twitter account because I took it out. I was ashamed, but you know, and that was like, yeah, I wasn't moved by the truckers or anything like that. But that one press conference, I'm like, these are good Canadian patriots, men standing up for the women and children and men all over the country that are getting it raw right now. So, yeah, that was my turning point.
I talked to both of them, Max and Randy. I feel very badly about what happened to Randy. I said, Randy, you might want to try to tone it down. I'm worried. And unfortunately, he did, of course, end up being arrested. So
Yeah, a lot of good people. They,
I say,
they
you know,
arrested
yeah,
Max too.
state of the country, right?
Yeah.
But anyways, yeah, no. We've had differences too. I mean, we've had wicked spats, right? I mean, me and Max and me and Randy have gone at it. We've had like wicked spats online and things like that. But I mean, at the end of the day, I think that we all understood that, you know, ultimately it's okay to have different opinions. That's what I'm getting at, is that's fine. It doesn't mean that that's not an important part of learning, finding your way, you know, finding your path. You know, and disagreement is just as important as in democracy as agreement is, if not even more important. You know, I would say that tolerating disagreements, dissidents, and, you know, people who go against the norm is, you know, more vital to democracy than people who just go along with it.
Amen.
Right? That's what keeps democracies vital. So, yeah, lots of love for those two characters, and for sure. And you know, if they're listening, hi. I'm sure we'll see each other again in Ottawa. I don't think that our stories are done. I'm not sure what rules exactly we're going to play yet, but yeah.
Well, thanks for taking time away from your family. I can hear that they're waiting for you, so I appreciate the opportunity.
I like playing over there.
Awesome. My favorites. We'll invite them on next time if they're not camera shy. But
they'll bomb you all day long.
That'd be cool. All right. Thanks for the time. I really appreciate it. Good stuff. We'll talk soon.
Yeah. Thank you.
Right.
Thanks,
Cheers.
Jim. Take care.
Bye.
Recordings.
And that's how you do that. The Andy Lee Show. Catch her on Twitter, catch her on the YouTube, catch her on our own website here. The links are in the show description below. The Real Andy Lee Show. Here she is on the YouTube. And yeah, we started it out with this and then we didn't hit it. But, you know, sometimes the first hour, like, I don't know this woman and I appreciate her work. So I kind of want to get the background of, like, who is the person that I'm talking to without hitting a whole bunch of issues really hard. So that was a good backgrounder. Good first interview, and I look forward to having her on again soon, especially because she's working on stuff. She's in a position where people bring her news, break stories. And yeah, there it is. That's how you do that. The Real Andy Lee Show. Catch her on all the links in the show description below. Peace, love, hug your neighbor, and whatever. Stop masking the fucking children. I love you. I'm out.